Ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot for coming out this afternoon. A bit formal and informal setting, which is always a delight. But for those of you all who are not familiar with who we are at the Institute of World Politics, we are not a think tank. We are indeed a graduate university. And we focus specifically on international relations and the elements of statecraft, while at the same time we focus on intelligence tradecraft. And we put these elements together for our students who are already, many of them, well placed within government, DOD, and many on the Hill already. But our focus is to give them a foundation, similar to what the war colleges, I'm sure many of us in this room have attended, but to give them a strong foundation on why it is they believe and what they believe before they actually begin their jobs. Because we focus in on that it's important for a young man or young woman to know why it is that they've been called to service and what it is indeed to serve. So this is a strong focus. So on behalf of the Institute, welcome. It's just great to have you. So I have the privilege of being able to read some of this fine... No, going to do it, Brett. I'm delighted to do this. I've been waiting to do this. So many of you all know Brett, but I've kept off as many decorations as an accomplished officer. But to give you a little background, Brett grew up in upstate New York and northern Maine. So he already is rough by nature and knows the outdoors. But he enlisted in the Army in April of '89 as an infantryman, and he became an EOD technician in July of 1993. And he attained the rank of Sergeant First Class, and then he commissioned through the Officer Candidate School program and a distinguished military graduate in the Ordnance Corps in August of 2001. In July of 2008, he was designated a nuclear officer, and he currently he is the Army Fellow over at the FBI with Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate. His military education is extremely lengthy with multiple schools, but his primary leadership development course, the Navy School of Explosive Ordnance Disposal, Advanced Access and Dismemberment, the NCO course, Joint Nuclear EOD courses, Advanced EOD Management courses, Advanced NCO, Officer Candidate School, Officer Advanced Course, Command General Staff, Nuclear and Counterproliferation Officer courses, Nuclear Weapons, Nuclear Policy, Theater Nuclear Operations, and Joint Combined Warfighting Schools. The civilian education includes a bachelor's from Excelsior in New York, a master's in mechanical engineering with specialization in explosives from New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology, and he's currently a PhD candidate in explosives engineering at Missouri University of Science and Technology. And Brett, I will say this, in the couple of months that we've gotten to know each other, he's not only an officer extraordinaire from the field, and if you ever read his resume, that backs that up. But he's an officer of intellect, and he is applying the two, which is really going to enable us to get the job done, specifically in the area that you are a subject matter expert in. So, Brett, it's just an honor to have you, and I look forward to many years of building relationship with you. So,
all right, thank you, sir. I appreciate it, Chris.
We welcome Brett.
All right. All right, thanks. I appreciate it. So what I'm going to cover is going to be a 6-month tour, basically, that our team performed in Iraq back in 2004. I actually I gave this, I practiced this brief yesterday on a bunch of interns at the FBI, and the interns were less than 10 years old when we were doing this mission. So I didn't realize how way back in time it was. One thing I want to say, Whenever I say I in this presentation, I mean we, and fortunately when I say we, I actually have parts of the team here. I've got Bob, I've got Shane, I've got Rick here, so it's good to have them here, and they can keep my lies straight, right? All right, so, and actually yesterday afternoon I went to, I had coffee with Charles Delfer, and was sitting down with him and going over, and he just told me to have fun. So I'm gonna have fun, all right? So, again, it was 2004, and let me give you a prep beforehand. Oh, I do have to cover the legal part, you know. So the views expressed are those of the author and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. Army, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. All right, we've taken care of that, because I'm still active duty, all right? So, back in 2004 in Iraq, it had been a year since the invasion, right? So you've got multiple things that have started to happen. For example, one, if you were to go back in time, and you know, when I was there for April of 2003, we had a lot of ammunition that was just all over the place, right? And it was hard to account for it all. We moved, I don't even know how many millions of pieces of ordnance out of Baghdad in April and May. So there's a large, you know, so you had a large stock for insurgents to take possession of the unaccounted for munitions. So the insurgency starts to begin. Saddam Hussein had been captured in December, and then you had Sunni and Shia factions starting to rise. You got Muqtada al-Sadr, you're ramping up an insurgency, and then you have the Abu Ghraib prison controversy. Boy, just mix all that together, right? And now, now we actually start to deploy. So on the initial push into Iraq, you had the Exploitation Task Force. Unfortunately, I got a rep here who was actually on the XTF too. So their mission on the XTF was the aim of discovering WMD, not inspecting and developing an analytic assessment of the Iraq program, right? So they're out to see, hey, is there WMD here? That was the XTF mission, military-driven type mission. Then the CIA took over and created the Iraq Survey Group, so that way you changed the nature of the mission into the search for truth on the WMD, because we weren't finding the WMD, right? So obviously you've got all the political references that are happening during this time. Hey, you went to war for WMD, where's the WMD? All right, we've got to get onto this. Why did we get this wrong, all right? So the couple references that I do use within the presentation, all right, are going to be one, the Delfer report. So if you were to go to just the Government Printing Office website, you can get the comprehensive report of the Special Advisor to the DCI and Iraq WMDs. All right, I'd love to have a hard copy of it. The GPO, you know, charges a lot of money. So fortunately, you get it down on PDF. And there's 3 volumes, and then you have the addendums, all right? Other 2 books that I'm going to reference are going to be Curveball by Bob Dragan, which is very good. And then finally, it's going to be Hide and Seek by Charles Delfer. So if you were to read these, I recommend either going Curveball, then the Delfer report, and then Charles Delfer's book, or read it backwards. Read his book, then read the Delfer report, and then read Curveball. You know, sometimes if you take a look at analysis backwards, it can tell you a different method, right? So, so you've got the, and then this here, this is the picture of the Perfume Palace, right? It wasn't bombed in our initial invasion back in 2003 because they thought it was a mosque, right? So fortunately, we're able to, the Iraq Survey Group was able to take over the building. It's interesting going through Curveball, and you can hear input from Dr. K going, you know, hey, I want this built faster, you know, and then the people who were taking care of that contract said, oh yeah, we'll get it built faster, but we won't fix the plumbing. So then you had to go outside and use the porta potties. And we called it Perfume Palace because evidently on the backside, written in Arabic, is there's nothing sweeter than the smell of Saddam or something to that effect. So, yes. All right. So this is the team. So this is this is Chem Bio Disablement Team 4. So obviously there was 1, 2, and 3 beforehand, right? I got 2 pictures here because at no point, when you're ever out there on a team, can you have everyone together on the same photo. So we had our normal chem breakdown, chem officer, chem NCO senior, right, who are running the team, and then you got chem operations officer, and then a chem decon team, chem sampling team, chem transload team, and then you got some EOD troublemakers in there. Then you have a bio analysis person, and then we had equipment, chemical instrumentation equipment maintainer. So you put all that combination together, and it was nice. For me, we were stationed out of Aberdeen, Prairie Ground, Edgewood area, and the team welcomed me in and at a short notice, hey, I'm gonna come deploy with you, and we storm formed in Norm the fastest I ever have. So it was a great opportunity to work with everyone. The first picture is there from our first time going up on the roof of, how would you like to be deployed in an area and have a nice lake outside? It's kind of nice sometimes, right? And then the other picture was when I was out on an escort and they took a picture, and I didn't know about this picture until about 2 weeks ago, so that's pretty good. I get to learn something new. So now let's start on the mission, all right? So sure enough, why don't we go dig some holes? It was funny when I was briefing this at the FBI the other day, I said, all right, and guess who put me in this hole? The FBI. So it was, back then, you'd have detainees, and they would say, hey, I know where the WMD is, right? Because that's going to get you some special treatment, right? So then the detainees get taken out of whatever prison they were in, and then they get paraded around to different areas where they can say the WMD is. So at this point, we're up in Taji, right? And they've got backhoes, everything all lined up, and he just is sitting there, and he goes and just points there. And they dig a hole. We hop down. I've got a Schonstatt there. It's a metal detector. And I just go up and down, and well, I already know, we already pulled all the dirt out of the hole. I'm pretty sure there's not going to be anything to the left and right. So I hop out of the hole, and they dig another hole, and you hop back in. After about 5 or 6 holes, you get out, and you just go over to the FBI guy. He's lying. So that was our initial flavor of what we were going to be doing in the Iraq Survey Group, supporting their search for truth and understanding where the WMD was at, the development. Another thing that we were going to take a look at is this is the Tuatha, this is where the Yellowcake was at. So we were asked to go down and x-ray one of the containers because they needed to get the dimensions on the inside. All the containers are sealed, they have the IAA seals on them, and they couldn't bust open the seals, but they needed to understand the inner containment. But that was all collected, and this is all old declared Yellowcake, right? If you were to take a look, it's Italy on the yellow boxes, and I can't remember where the actual origin was for the uranium oxide on the upper left-hand side. All right, but all this was co-located at Tuatha, again, and trying to get to a nuclear program from Yellowcake takes a long process, all right? So another thing that we also went out to do was to take a look at the captured enemy ammunition storage areas. So I remember when I said 2003 we were trying to package everything up out of Baghdad itself. We were just one element of trying to get a handle of all that the ammunition throughout the country. Eventually, they co-locate into multiple CEAs, right? And then each CEA would have multiple bunkers, above ground, outside storage areas, et cetera, right? So now we had to go in and go inspect all these bunkers, looking to verify that we didn't miss WMD and that it's not in the bunkers. So take a look at the picture there. All right, so can you find the WMD in that pile of ordnance? And that was typical, right, within some of these bunker systems. Accountability as a whole, sometimes you'd walk into a bunker and you'd see an inventory sheet. Oh, wow, this person actually did an inventory, whoever was here before we invaded, right? But you go to the next bunker over, and that person obviously didn't do any inventory. And you take a look, you got all the propellant on the ground, and we've got to walk over all that to take a look and inspect boxes. So, and then if you can take a look here, do you see the person's head in the other picture? All right, so, yeah, they're standing on their tippy toes, right? So imagine 100 of these bunkers that you've got to go through, and tens of these CEAs. And these are just the bunkers. Wait a minute. We got open storage too, right? So you got the open storage areas. And in the background, you can see some of the bunker complexes, right? So another thing issue you had in these CEAs is once we invaded and the Iraqis pulled out and left everything unsecure, well, you know what's there? Metal. Metal is important to people, right? Because you can't go out to the tree and pick metal off, pick your metal off the apple. You got to get it from the ground, underneath the ground. So if you've got metal up above the surface, then that's great. And so they would go get the rotating bands off the projectiles, maybe, for example. They'd heat up the ordnance, and they'd try to knock off the rotating bands because it was a soft metal, right? And sometimes heating up ordnance is not a good idea, and it would detonate. So then we've got to go through all this to make sure there's no WMD there. The one bane of our existence was the long box, though, right? So the picture on the right is a 122 millimeter rocket. We were told that the long boxes might have the WMD 122 millimeter rockets. So we would open up the box, and you can see here the box keeps going to the left a little bit further, right, in this photo. So you'd open up and you'd find a short rocket in a long box. So it was very frustrating when you'd open up a bunker and you'd see a bunch of long boxes, knowing that you had to go open up every single long box to make sure that there was a short round in the long box, all right? And then you've got all the propellant piled up around, etc. So we do that for a while, and then you start to have Insurgency is starting to investigate their own WMD production. This is an incident that happened on April 26, where the majority of our team went into the chemical soup to go after to take a look at the chemical soup. So it's the Alibu chemical network, right? And they were an insurgency that was trying to make improvised ricin, right, initially. So they go to, and unfortunately, the site that they're working on blew up. One of our team was burned severely. 2 people from our security elements were killed, Sergeant Rocky and Sergeant Baker, Pennsylvania National Guard, and one person from Maine working in the Pennsylvania National Guard. And then this picture here was an award-winning photo. I apologize, I don't have the journalist's name here, but this was used as to demonstrate that things are starting to go bad in Iraq, right? And this photo was used as an example of everything that's happening. So then May happens. So EOD unit from Pine Bluff, Arkansas is out on a response, and they come and they got called up and they said, hey, we've got this piece of ordnance here. You can see the main charge there on the bottom right-hand side. And you can see that the nose area has been blown off, right? Fortunately, the unit but this projectile the smell coming off of this was incredibly potent, right? And the unit actually was from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where we actually have a chemical DMEL, or we have associated chemical knowledge. So they understood responding to chemical type munitions. And so they packaged this up, and then they gave us a call, and then we went and responded. And to this day, I cannot get the smell. I can't explain to you the smell, but I would take the hottest pepper and make it as dirty as you possibly could, and then smell it and then apply heat. It was very, we got out of the vehicle and we could smell it from probably about, 50 feet away, 100 feet away. It was very potent. So we packaged that up. And we noticed a couple of things. So then we pulled the residue out. You can see, and in the end, this ended up being a mustard projectile, right? We can see actually that it's old, can't be used, and what the insurgents did, they thought they had a regular normal projectile, packed the nose fuse with explosives, blew up the projectile thinking that would be a normal improvised explosive device and cause a catastrophic injury to anyone located, but no, it didn't really go off. It just blew the nose off. So then we took a look and we saw the middle picture there in the top, that's a burster tube that's been blowing out. And so when we first took a look at that, well, maybe the detonation must have done something to that. So it was kind of just interesting at first. Then, a couple days, well, that was 6 May, and then on 15 May, we had an interesting incident. EOD team was out in southern Baghdad next to FOB, then called Ferris Huggins. It was renamed Falcon when I was there later on in 2006. So the EOD team responded to a projectile. It had the same key ID features as that other one as far as being blown out in the nose, right? And a couple days earlier, that same team leader had responded to an IED where the insurgent used an illumination round and it had the same type of effect to the projectile, right? So he walks up. He's unfortunately in a low area, so there's high ground of buildings around him, so he's in a danger area. Walks up and sees the projectile, notices it's just blown out the nose, and it looks like another illumination round, and part of the trigger system, he recognized that it was the same bomber from the couple days before, so then you unfortunately you go down the track of, oh, same guy, he's taken from the same cache, he's got the wrong projectile. Because illumination, the worst it's going to do is shoot out a flare. It's not going to detonate. All right. So then, when they're coming back to post, they start to get blurry eye. It's hard for them to see. They're starting to not feel very well at all, and they pull in. Fortunately, in this location, we had 2 different EOD units co-located there. Further in was the Army element, and closer to us was the Navy EOD team. So they pulled in, they go to the Navy guys and say, listen, there's something in the back of our truck and it's a hazard. You need to package it up and we've got to go to the docks, right? And so then they go out. The Navy team, they mask up, they take out initial chem, our initial chem detection, and hey, there's something bad here. They seal it up as best as they can, right? And then they notify the higher authority at the time, which I think was the 63rd Ordnance Battalion EOD, and then that unit then calls us up, and fortunately then it was an EOD guy calling up, and then I picked up the phone and we started talking in code, in EOD code, and hung up the phone. And I turned to Shane. I go, "We got to respond." So kind of interesting because we weren't really set up to initially respond to an incident because we're going out with these inspection teams. So we get everything spun up and we go and respond. So once we get on site, we set up everything and we know, it's hard to see, that's our objective right there. That bagged up projectile. So now we go down range. We set everything up. We set up a hotline, contamination control area, and we head on down. So as we start to uncover what the Navy team packaged up, we have ion scan technology with us. And I was talking to a New York Times journalist, C.J. Chivers, and he told me, he goes, the picture on the right is a historical relevant photo. So we took a picture of what the ion scan was saying, and it's hard to see, it's out of focus, right? But it says nerve low, and it's got the gas mask. And that ion scan is screaming nerve, right? And so that is the first photograph of using electronic means to detect chemical warfare agent in a war environment. So I never thought about it that way. And he said, no, that's a key photo, right? So again, it's starting to scream, and so we start to unpackage everything. And if you take a look at the nose, it looks about the same as that other projectile, right? So it's understandably that the EOD team leader said, hey, this is just another illumination round, and throws it up on the truck. This one didn't have that pungent smell, right? The other projectile, you could tell that there's something bad in that, right? This one doesn't have that type of smell. So we go in. So at this point, this is when we become investigators, right? So now we have to go into evidence collection and file chain of custody procedures, right? Because think about it. We went to war for WMD, and we're pretty sure we found some sort of WMD. And we're just a ragtag bunch of guys, you know, and a couple gals, right? So we go into evidence because this is our job in Tech Escort. So we're gonna pull a sample, right? And we go into full chain of custody. We're gonna annotate date, time, group, right? Sign, dual signature on the evidence. And that's sarin we're pulling out, right? That's kind of interesting. So this was a GB2 type projectile, right? So in the GB2, if you were explaining what GB2 is, you've got two chemicals, right? Separate, they're not as much of a hazard. But when you mix them together, they create sarin nerve agent, right? So when the projectile was fired off, right, with the explosive charge put in the front, it blew the diaphragm that separated the two chemicals and mixed it right then and there. So Saddam, so if you were to take a look at the Delphi report, I think it's referenced in there, the pre-1991 regime only had about, I think they did about 6 of these experimental 152 projectile GB2 rounds. And they declared that they were all destroyed, right? But the problem is, when we bombed Muthana in 1991, and I'll show you some pictures of what that looked like later on, when you bomb a building and a building collapses, right? Sometimes there's, you know, I would opine that you have now hidden some stuff underneath, or you've lost some stuff, or you've lost accountability because, well, this bunker has collapsed, this building has collapsed, right? And then when we invaded in 2003, the UN had to pull out beforehand. Muthana was wired up for surveillance. There was by the UN, so the UN had to pull out. So now, if you've ever been to a desert, it's hard to, you know, it's hard to grow some things, right? Why would I want to make bricks when I look over there and I see a bunch of buildings that have been blown up and there's free bricks on the ground? I don't have to make bricks anymore. So I'm going to go collect bricks. And as you start to collect bricks, you might find something underneath the bricks. And that's what I think how this came out. So this was, you know, just a one-of. But it's just interesting to the fact that all these things started to happen. If you were to take a look at understanding how the insurgency is working, trying to use munitions against the coalition, and then one of these happens to be in there, a lot of things had to fall into place in order for that to happen. All right. And fortunately, the team got, you know, they were able to get immediate medical care there. Later on, I'll explain New York Times, what C.J. Chivers did for the troops, though, as far as getting a reference to recognition for people who are exposed. So then you're going to go through, you're going to package it up. All right, well, let's seal it all up, and then working in these environments, in a hot environment, I just want you to understand that the person here on the bottom left coming out, getting cut out, right, going through decon, Their shirt normally was probably the color of the tan background building, right? It is exhausting to make it through. And I think this might be the photo, I don't know, I've been looking for it. So on the right, all right, is a picture of a Fox vehicle. And I think this is probably the first time that the Fox was used in a war environment to detect chemical agent also. So all right, you know what? That was 15 May. We packaged all that up. We go back and we sit down. And you know what? Let's just keep it going. 16 May, we're going to have to respond to something. So the previous unit, the unit that was associated with Pine Bluff, they go out on a raid, right? And they recover 9. So that projectile that that had the mustard residue in it, that's what we call an M110 projectile. It has a burster tube down the center, so that way any liquid that you have on the inside can be dispersed. Normally it's a white phosphorus, signaling light generating, smoke. But also in our old days, when we used to have chemical, you would use the M110 and put mustard agent in. So these were Spanish M110s. And so the unit knew when they rolled up on this cache, and these weren't used as IEDs yet, they knew that the way the plug is on the nose, that this is an M110, so they called us. And then we picked them up, the 9 of them, and then we're going to x-ray them first. And then look at that. That was a key ID feature. When we x-rayed and we saw that blown out burster tube, that led us to, hey, that's some type of D-mill because they're all done the same way. Oh, yeah, that mustard IED, right, had that same effect. So if you take, again, I'll reference the Delphi report. In there, I believe they said that they found 10, the Iraqis found 10 rounds after UN or before the UN came in or whatever, and they had sealed up one of the bunkers, Mathana, and so they possibly demilled these themselves, and they tried pouring whatever agent they could out. Well, if you try pouring something out, you're not going to be able to get all the agent out, right? So that's why you would have some of that residue that we saw on the mustard IED. And surprisingly, after how many years, right, that, probably over 10 years, that just smelled awful. So, so now, 18 May. And it's funny, so I go back, so we go back to the Perfume Palace and go upstairs, and I go talk to a person named Rita. Rita, only known as her first name, she's referenceable in curveball and referenceable in hide and seek. And she goes, oh, they want to talk to you back in DC. I said, okay, so I called back, and they said, hey, we're kind of interested in the fact that you found all this stuff. We like to bring it back, right? And I kind of chuckle. I'm like, I go, that's our job, Tech Escort, to move all these things, but I really don't know how you're actually going to move sarin and all these things. I never really thought about it. Even though we're trained, I didn't think that we would actually have to perform this part of the mission, right? And I said, anyways, I think you've got to deal with some different parts of the government to get permission beforehand, right? He goes, oh yeah, you're probably right. So as I'm leaving, Rita turns to me and says, hey, you got to be quiet about this for right now, all right? There's obviously political sensitivity, all right? I said, not a problem. So head back to our house on the lake, right? And teams, right? You got to remember, you're tired, you're beat, right? Team's gonna rest. They're playing some Xbox, right? And some Halo. And then on the left side, because we care, we actually have AFN News playing, right? So we can multitask. We need to pay attention to what's going on in the world. And they happen to have a story. They're covering an excerpt from Congress, and Undersecretary of Defense Wolfowitz was actually at Congress, and they're talking about, what are they talking about? Well, they're talking about the sarin IED. Wait a minute, I thought we weren't talking about that. All right, okay, not a problem. I understand how the government works now. All right, so back then I was a first lieutenant. I was a sergeant first class. It wasn't my first rodeo, but now I'm understanding how this is working. So it's interesting, right? So I think it's Senator Brownback, or whatever, I forgot. Senator Brownback and then Undersecretary Wolfowitz are going back and forth. And Wolfowitz states this: so right now the shells and the substance are being sent back to the United States for a conclusive test back here. Where do you think they were? No, they're in our remote connex, right? So I go, you ever talk to the TV? Yeah, I talked to the TV. So we sat there and we went down, sat down, and we sat down with the Air Force Manual of Transportation, right? Hazardous material transportation. All right, what do we need to do this? And and naturally there's a rule for everything, and you just got to find the rule, right? And you got to find someone to pay for the rule. Remember that guy in Washington? I said, hey, we really like to get that back. Went back to him afterwards. I go, you're paying. So this is how you ship it back, right? This is the shipper's declaration, right? So, and it's stated on here, right? So we're shipping sarin, we're shipping sulfur mustard, and samples of that. We've got our quote-unquote overpacked used, right? So that way we've got this safe, and we're good to go, and we can fly it. And we're going to package it up on a pallet, and we're going to have a nice hazard sticker on there, inhalation hazard. I think that's the sarin one there. Yep. So we will take one private C-17 plane. Well, it's not private, it's a U.S. government plane, right? So it will land in Baghdad. We'll load this on the plane. The only thing on the plane will be the air crew, tech escort team to take it back, and this will fly on the back ramp. So it's kind of funny. So it's kind of funny when you walk up and you're loading this on the back of the plane, and you suddenly realize how long a C-17 is, right? When you're walking up to get to the center, to get to the front of the C-17, and the pilot's walking from his area to the back of the C-17, and his question is, why do I need a gas mask? All right, and then you kind of pack your head, you pat him on the back, oh, he outranked me, but hey, what's good, sir? So this is what you're transporting? And after the conversation, he goes, it's on the ramp, and if anything happens, I am dropping the ramp, and it's going in the ocean, right? So we had to do a nonstop air refuel, couldn't stop in any other country, and land in Aberdeen, and that's how we can pull it off. That's how we can move it back to the U.S. Because according to Wolfowitz, it's on its way. So I had to get it on its way. That is a implied task, right? So then later on, so we pull that off, and all right, high fives all around. Then June happens. All right, it's another month. Why don't we bring something else in? So we do. So the Poles, in the Polish sector down south, they've now found out a source, right, who says they have the WMD. So let me digress. I got to tell you a story about, hey, I've got a source who's got the WMD. One time we were trying to go out on a mission, and the British brigadier, great gentleman, right, he comes up and says, Brett, we have a very sensitive issue. We have a source that we've worked with, and we need to take care of him, and he's bringing the WMD here. And I need you to take possession of the WMD and verify that's the WMD. Okay, sir, not a problem. So we were actually had to go roll out on a mission, but we could push off for an hour. So then, sure enough, all of a sudden this source arrives, right? And I'm handed a box that's about the size of a jewelry box, and it's very light, right? So already I'm going to start eliminating a lot of things that this is not. It's not nuclear because it would be really heavy otherwise, right? So then we go around the corner and open up the box, and inside is a CO2 cylinder with a sticker on it that says 99.99999% pure plutonium made in Germany. There's a red mercury scam. So whenever someone said, I've got a source and they've got the WMD, yeah, how many holes have we been in? How many jewelry boxes of WMD do we open? So we go down to Babylon, and normal military operation. I think this is what happened, right? So Iraq Survey Group is UK, US, and Australian forces, right? We all kind of speak the same language, English. And then we're going to the Polish sector, right? And I believe they speak Polish. And you think you'd bring an interpreter. Sounds like a good idea, right? So next time we do this, bring the interpreter, all right? So we're trying to work on talking or whatever. So we go, and they packaged up they had sealed these two rockets up. And so first thing we're doing, we're actually doing this thing called slosh test. We're like, tilting up and down. We're like, I think something's in there, So then you put it at an angle and we take an X-ray, and sure enough, oh wow, that's pretty neat. We have a liquid line. So curiosity, comes in. So after that, what we're going to do is we can't open this up right now where we're at. We don't have the tools. We don't have anything. We would like some sort of field what Wolfowitz is talking, that field confirmation analysis. So we're going to apply some of that. So we've got the portable isotopic neutron spectroscopy system. I'm sure all of you have one of these in your home, right? So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a neutron into the item that we want to exploit, right? And that's going to go in. It's going to knock a gamma off, and we're going to use a high purity germanium crystal, all right? That has to be kept super cool with liquid nitrogen in the desert, all right? So and we're going to use that. We're going to see if we can detect. And sure enough, we got the spectrum that came up as nerve. Hey, that's great. That's really interesting. So we package everything up, and then we go back and then we exploit this ourselves. We actually had to do the tap and drill to pull the agent out of this rocket, right? So, hey, we finally got a long rocket minus the rocket and the fact that it's completely unusable as a weapons of mass destruction. It's old, rusty, right? This came out of the Comisia area, and I'll cover that a little bit later. So out of this, we're able to pull cyclosarin out of this rocket, and it had degraded over time. And I'll come back to Comisia and I'll explain what I think happened on that one. Well, that's really good, right? Now the poles are really interested, so now they start engaging the source down there. And obviously, well, the source got money, so the source is going to give you some more stuff because he wants more money, right? So we get down there, and we've got to wait because they've got to arrange for the source to line everything up. So in the meantime, we get to tour Babylon, right? So I got to show you some history. You can't do a presentation without some history, right? So this here is actually a picture of the catacombs that were probably underneath the supposed Hanging Gardens of Babylon, right? And we actually had a tour guide there. It was great Iraqi individual, and he turned and said, "Hey, everyone, point your cameras and turn your flashes on and shine it down these hallways," right? And we did, and those are bats. So it's pretty neat. But the neat thing, right, is it was so cold, right? So, this is June, of 2004, and when we're up on the surface on the sand, it's incredibly hot, but we go down there and it's nice and cold. So it made sense that this would be part of that, where goods would transverse, back in the Babylonian days. Then it was kind of interesting. You got to see some of the bricks that were used to build Babylon, and they had Nebuchadnezzar, I believe, his stamp would be put on there. And then Saddam ruined it by building on top of it and putting his signature on bricks on top of all that. But it was neat to be there historically, and you got to see some of the emblems that were actually on the gates to Babylon. The Babylonian gates are in Germany now, in Berlin, which is probably a good thing, in the end. So then they line the source up. So we load up Shane goes, all right, I want the EOD guys in the air-conditioned van, right? So that way, once we hit the ground, because we don't know what we're going after, right? So once we hit the ground, you guys are going first. I want you guys fresh, right? So we hop in the van, and we start I think it was probably 2 hours at least trip to, I don't know where we were at, 4 hours. 4-hour trip, right? How long do you think the air conditioning lasts in the van? About 10 minutes, right? And the guy driving doesn't speak English, but he's got one thing in English: the greatest hits of 1979 on tape, playing continually for 4 hours. So by the time we get down there, we're ready to go to work, right? So what we come across is a whole bunch of these, more rusted out, blown up, 122 millimeter soccer warheads. And now they know the source. Oh, they're looking for liquid, right? Not a problem. I'll put liquid in here, and they put diesel and insecticide in here. You could smell the diesel when we walked up. They had they put inner tube taped up on there. You can see on there, and so we packaged all that up. I think we pulled a total of 41 of those, and those didn't have it. Those were all empty. So what happened with regarding Comassia in 1991, the Gulf War, when the U.S. went in, U.S. Army engineers blew up Comassia. Comassia was the storage location for the 122 millimeter cyclosarin rockets that were used in the Iran-Iraq War for Iraq to fire against Iran, right? So not good, right, to blow up chemical weapons storage area that contains chemical weapons. So if we can relearn one thing from that, we don't want to do that. So when that stuff blew up, it sent ordnance all over the place, right? And obviously some stuff will be unaccounted for. And what I think happened on that one that actually had the cyclosarin still in it, although it was the potency of it was very degraded, right? So it probably blew up. One part of it busted open, dumped a lot of sarin out. There's maybe a heat reaction in there. It comes down, hits the ground, gets collapsed, and somehow it's sealed back up with a little bit of that agent left. And then it's just sitting in the sun for 12 years until the source finds it. It's just a lot of circumstances that fell into place. And I want to caveat that we're covering everything that we did from April to October 2004. Later on, there's 122 millimeter rockets that are found containing agent. But the thing is, Saddam's government declared that there's 450, I think it was 450 of the 155 mustard projectiles that were unaccounted for, and 550 of the rockets that were unaccounted for. It's in the UN report, it's in the Delphi report. So, wait a minute, we had that group, Alaboob Network. So, all right, if we're not working on old conventional WMD stuff, maybe we're going to have some. Maybe we're going to go against the insurgency trying to make their own. And so that's what's happening here. So a team here is doing transload. This is from the ricin case when they first started going through and finding ricin. So Albu was trying to make improvised GA, nerve agent, and then improvised mustard agent. And they're doing it out in Fallujah. And so we went on this mission called Rubber Chicken 1 and Rubber Chicken 2, much to the chagrin of Mr. Delfer. And so sometimes we would get called, and we get the call, hey, we're going to come pick you up, and we're going to take you into the red zone, and you got to wear your civilian clothes, and we've got the source who's got the WMD. Again, it was just a recurring theme. And so we go and show up, and here we're going up and pulling up some ordnance that's coming out of the back of a truck. And it's funny, at this time, I think we're actually getting this from the quote-unquote head of the Iraqi equivalent FBI at the time. And so I go show up. We're dignified. We thank him for his work. And he goes, I'm pulling this out of Fallujah. I go, where is it? He goes, it's in the back of the car. And we start to walk back there, and he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a key fob and hits the trunk opening thing with the key fob. This is when he had the start of the IDs going off, right? And using key fobs and everything. And I turned to him, I said, could you please not use the key fob around us? I'd appreciate that. So then we got this. This is the bane of my existence, the mortars. This is a picture of what was a chicken farm in Fallujah. And supposedly these are the modified mortars that might have this improvised nerve or blister agent in it. And the unit finding it was told not to blow it up. So then we go and show up on site to go to exploit the chicken farm. And I'm looking around for that. It's very interesting when you walk in wearing a Tyvek suit and a gas mask, and you walk into literally a chicken farm with hens all over the place, and you're trying to scoot them around as you're trying to look for supposed WMD. So then we finally were able to reach back, like, where is this stuff? Oh, we blow it up. Oh, so you blew up the stuff we told you not to blow up. Mm-hmm. All right. So communication, always good. I always wanted to see him, but never got a chance to see him. So now we've got the cyclosarin rockets now. We actually have some cyclosarin, some bronze level standard exploitation that we do back at back on Slayer. So now we've got to transport it back, because guess who? DC wants this stuff back, right? So okay, not a problem. So this is kind of interesting. So I wanted to show you, we're going to put that ordnance inside this vessel, and that gets tightened down to so much PSI, so nothing's coming out of it. And the funny story on this one, right? And look how happy we are to move nerve agent, right? It's a fun thing. So the logistics folk there on the right, they said we need the shipper's deck. I'm like, you know we're good to go. They're like, hey, Secretary of Defense is going to release one of his planes to you, and he needs your shipper's deck. So I go, really? Okay. So I go and do the shipper's deck. I walk back and I go, here's a shipper's deck. And they go, okay, you got your plane. I'm like, I'm pretty sure the Secretary of Defense was not waiting on my signature, but they took pleasure in that. So we got another plane. So not only do you have, right, I'm trying to cover everything within the Iraq survey group on the technical side, right? So you covered the nuclear side. On the bio side, if you were to take a look at what we initially were going in for, you need to look at Curveball, right? Recommend this book here by Bob Drogan. And initially, Colin Powell's briefing about the mobile biolabs, and that's what he briefs up to the UN, right? So on the bio side, we're dealing with the insurgencies making improvised ricin, right? On the bio side, chem side, we covered a couple of things, but you have another method, right? You've got delivery, right? So on the delivery side, you had 2 weapon systems, and the UN mandate stated that you could not have anything that went more than 150 kilometers, right? But these 2 systems did. This is the solid rocket. This is a solid rocket fueled Al-Fatah. And so it actually had the UNMOVIC sticker on it here. It was interesting, as we go through all the different captured enemy ammunition areas, we would come across SA-2 and SA-3 missiles, and they would have all the UN stickers on it. And then the newer stuff that Saddam's government was working on would have these UNMOVIC stickers on it. So that means someone's already inspected this already, all right? So there we have to go X-ray a couple of these and verify, that is not a WMD containing missile, all right? That's actually a submunition warhead there. So that was the solid fuel one. Then you had the liquid fueled one, which is the Al-Samud, all right? And this one was just a high explosive warhead on this one. So you had those 2 systems, and they went beyond the 150 kilometer. And I believe it was the Al-Samud was what was the final justification for it violating the UN sanction, and one of the things referencing we're going to war because it violates, if I remember correctly. So now, someone have a question? No. So another thing we had to do was close out of Mathana. So remember, Mathana was the chemical production area, Tuatha was the nuclear production area, and Salman Pak was one of the bioproduction areas. So this is going in and taking a look at doing the final inspection for the Iraq Survey Group report on Mathana. So you can see here, we're going into one of the, this is actually the mustard production facility. The person in the blue shirt and the white hat, that's Hamish Kilt. He's referenceable within the curveball and hide and seek. Incredible wealth of knowledge. And to be able to be there with him and everything that he worked with the UN and his knowledge, and just incredible guy to be with. So we got to do the final inspection. So those are the mustard reactors there, evidently. But the interesting thing, this was helped built by the East Germans, if I remember correctly. So you can see where, hey, you know, when buildings get bombed, they kind of fall apart, and you know all those bricks go away. But those structures, they're still standing. You know, this is 13 years since we bombed. And the interesting thing, the tile on there was so incredibly shiny because it was built to, we're going to be doing, you know, nerve and blister agent production in these facilities, and so you had to have surfaces that were that could repel, and so the tiles still shine. It was just wild to see.
Can you go back to the previous one?
Yeah, this one.
No, one more.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yep. And all these pictures are in the are actually in the Delphi report too.
Thank you.
Yep. So. So then, so even though everything that we did on our mission is actually, on all of our missions, pretty much is referenceable within the Delphi report, later on you had a lot of other IDs happening. You had caches of, remember I said there's 450 of the mustard unaccounted for and 550 of the nerve agents unaccounted for, but declared, the Iraq government declared that, right, before we went to war. But unfortunately, the military wasn't as proactive and kind of restrictive. In fact, when I came back, when I filled out my paperwork and said, hey, I was exposed to X, Y, and Z, we worked on these following things, I couldn't get, the doc would not sign off on my post-deployment health certification. He goes, no, none of that happened, I'm not signing. And he wouldn't sign it. Even though we worked on all those different things. So C.J. Chivers did this article, it's in the New York Times, it's a good reference, right? And then as part of a result of that, then the Army came in and they created the chemical warfare agent exposure during OIF and New Dawn. So that way we can register, saying, hey, we were exposed, we worked on this, so that way we get into a registry, right? So that's a good thing that happened from that. So in the end, you got on the top is a quote from Michael Yandel. He was actually he was the team member on the Iraq on the sarin IED response, right? And he's got the quote there. But what I like about it is making these weapons and employing these weapons. Those decisions are made by people who are never going to respond to it, right? The people who are affected are going to be, unfortunately, we take a look at Syria, we see what happened in Syria. The children, are affected. Or it's the EUD, the EUD chem team on the ground that's going to have to deal with that problem. And then Charles, in the Delphi report, he unfortunately, it's, when Charles and I were talking yesterday, it's not foreshadowing, it's just a fact. It's a continuing possibility that insurgents will attempt to draw on resident expertise and develop unconventional weapons, right? So we have this going on today. So these are good, so it's always good to study history. Hey, we've got this problem going on in different parts of the world. How did we handle it the last time? Even though what got us in there was not maybe the correct reason. Study history. But in the end, it's not all doom and gloom, all right? Sometimes you can have some fun in deployments, right? So you got, so the Bath Party, they had their boats out there on the lake. So, we got to go out there and enjoy a fun time. Funny is the backstory on this one. Shane told us to go test these suits out. I think we were driving him crazy at this point. And he goes, get out there and test those suits out. And so we go, all right, we're going to the pool. So so you got the Perfume Palace in the background, right? And then this is Uday's castle, his palace, and Uday had a nice pool out there. And so sure enough, the coalition's going to go out there and fix the pool. And for some reason, a whole bunch of people brought their bathing suits to Iraq. I don't know. So we went out there to have some fun. Sometimes you get out to go, and then that's actually kind of interesting. That is a demo shot. That's a 500,000-pound ordnance weight shot. But you got to remember, ordnance weighs a lot more than the actual explosives on the inside, so it's probably only about 70,000-pound shot. But we're quite a ways away. But getting a chance to help out and blow some stuff up, that's pretty awesome. You get a chance to tour, the swords. The cross swords in Iraq. And then it's kind of a little known fact, it's kind of like Statue of Liberty. You can go up inside the arm, right? And then you might be able to stick outside there in the palm. So little bits of history that you don't know. So again, this is what I, using for sourcing on this. I've got the Delfer report. I've got Charles Delfer's book, Hide and Seek, the Curveball book by Bob Drogan, and then C.J. Shiver's article on the New York Times. So the reason I, besides coming in here, I'm often given the question, oh, we didn't find WMD in Iraq, did we? Or, oh, we found WMD in Iraq, right? No one understands that there's a gray line in between. We found WMD in Iraq, but it wasn't the WMD we were looking for, right? So you got to caveat that, all right? Question?
Well, I have a question about, there was a Swedish guy who was the head of the International Atomic Energy Commission, and you would see him on the news.
Oh, Hans Blix?
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was saying that there were not any weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
And then you had the people that Cheney was talking to, and they were saying that there were.
So that I'm gonna that I would reference. I recommend going through Curveball. So basically, you had single source reporting coming from Germany, right? A walk-in. I don't remember if it was a walk-in or whatever, but you had Iraqi that said, "Hey, I know something about WMD in Iraq." In the time, the U.S. has already beaten the drum on, "Hey, this is after 9/11," and so. He may or may not have manufactured his own stories, right, to say, hey, I know that there's WMD here, and he started describing these bioproduction trailers that could run remotely in 3 trailers, and they would move around, and he would just keep adding on to the story. The Germans wouldn't let us, the U.S., interview him, right? So we're getting information that comes single source information that we can't corroborate ourselves by going direct through Germany, who then shares it to DIA, and then CIA then pulls the DIA reporting, and then they start generating their reports. And Charles has said that if you were to take a look at the reporting, it sounds so credible, right? And you start going down that path, right? And then you might have the other side where, you know what, I need something to drive us to war, and this is my opinion, and this sounds really good, and we can go down this trail. So if you were to take a look at what Colin Powell was going to go brief at the UN, initially they were going to cover all these different parts and pieces, like, for example, the tubes that were supposedly used for doing uranium separation and all these different things. As Colin Powell got closer to delivering that brief, a lot of those things that would substantiate those elements of the WMD started to fall apart. But the only thing that sounded logical was the whole bioproduction trailers. And then so that's what really got briefed. And it's kind of interesting, right? I highly suggest you go back and take a look at at one point during Colin Powell's brief to the UN, they play a video of a jet flying that's pushing out supposed biological weapon, dispersing it, right? So we actually had, at one point, those were sitting in the center of the Iraq survey group. So they were in the center of the palace. And it was kind of a funny story. This person comes out and goes, "We found the WMD, we're gonna take it back to the States for full exploitation." And I turned to Hamish, I go, "Hey, why do we have WMD in the center fountain of our room?" And he goes, "That thing's so riddled with bullet holes, and I put the UN stickers on that myself." So he goes, "There's nothing in it. They're never going to find anything." So we did bring those spray tanks back. So.
Cheney also had some people, I think they were Iraqi bankers who were testifying to the presence of weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, and on that, I can't speak of, I'm a technical guy. Right, I like to stay in my technical world. When it comes down to the politics and the psychology, if we can start to figure out what someone's trying to think.
Well, I mean, one wasn't entirely convinced, particularly by Cheney's evidence, but one wondered about the Swedish guy. Let's say it was his.
Yeah, Hans Blix. Yeah, so he disagreed. And then you had and then unfortunately, after that, you had Dr. K, who, they found what they thought were these bioproduction trucks, I think 2 of them, and they brought them into the Slayer. And Dr. K, he went up, this is before he was part of the Iraq survey group, and he's out there, I think, speaking for NBC, and he says, "Yes, these are production trailers, this is how everything would work." Well, no, they actually were hydrogen production used to generate fuel for missile systems, right? So in the end, because and I highly recommend reading these books because they go into the technical expansion of why they weren't the bioproduction trailers and why they were nitrogen or hydrogen generating trailers. So, and we actually saw the trailers too. They were actually on Slayer. We got to go hop around them. They're kind of interesting.
Hydrogen bombs.
Huh?
Hydrogen bombs.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, but if you were to look at the trailer and you would see the trailer, it would initially you go, well, that could be something, but it's well, it could be something. What is it and what is it not? So. Any other questions? All right, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Brett, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We will definitely want you back.
Okay.
Definitely, because my head is spinning with some of this. This is all new to me, so it's tremendous stuff. So thank you very much.
All right.
Brett.
Thank you. I appreciate it, sir.
Good job, Brett.
All right. Thank you very much.
Hold on me until.
Oh, okay. Oh, here, I was going to shut this off. Yeah. I don't want to press the wrong button. Yeah.
Let me get some.
There should be a stop button. Oh, no, there should be the stop button. I can figure that one out.
Let me take a try.
Where's the red button? Oh, there you go.